guys, welcome to another episode of PB Garage. This episode we're going to be doing the oil pan and pump removal on my 2007 A4 B7. So one thing I want to caution is that to do this you need to disconnect the drivetrain, so that's the engine in your transmission, from the subframe. So it's going to be free and you need to figure out a way how to support that. The way I did it was I stood two 2x4s on vertical and resting on two 4x4s on the fenders, and I used some ratchet straps, two of them, to hold the engine. Now I preloaded it before I unloaded everything, but I also had a pump jack underneath, so that way I was just undoing the subframe bolts. There was a pump jack there as a fail-safe to make sure that the straps and everything above were going to hold the drivetrain. It's about 600 pounds, two straps are about 500 pounds each, and then the two 2x4s are plenty sufficient to hold the engine. You might want to use a crane or an engine crane or some other means, but that was the best, cheapest option for me. I didn't have to buy anything. And yeah, so let's get right into the removal. We're going to start by taking the accessory belt off, and this is just an 18mm wrench. And take the oil plug out and drain the oil, because it's all got to come out. And then take the oil return feed line off, and this is two M5 Allens. You can replace the gasket for this as well, might as well because it's being disturbed. Let that drain a bit as well, and put your oil plug back in just so it stops seeping all over the ground. The AC line bracket might be destroyed by now, but mine was intact, so take this off as well. You're going to swing the AC line out of the way once you get the AC off. This is an automatic car, so I've got some automatic lines I've got to undo and just remove to get out of the way. And then the snub mount and engine bracket needs to come off as well. You take these 13mm and the washers right out and drop those Allen bolts out. The whole thing will just come out as an assembly. Disconnect some electrical sensors here for your oil level sensor and your AC compressor, and swing those out of the way. And then you have three 13mm bolts holding your AC compressor in. This is going to drop. The AC lines will hold it, but you can strap it up with some bungees. Taking the sway bar bolts out, and then taking the brackets out as well. This is going to remove your entire sway bar, and you can just kick this right out of the way. Take the bottom end of the brackets, engine brackets out, and then do your transmission line brackets as well. This is for an automatic, so your manuals are going to be a little bit different. And get a little bit more sauce onto these bolts. They're a little stubborn. Then support your engine however you want to do it. And now we're going to start working on the subframe bolts. So at the back you have three 18mm bolts. You break them all loose with the breaker bar, and then at the front you have another three on each side at the front. So 1, 2, and the third one right here. So you can break those all with a breaker bar. And we're going to start at the back by removing the rearmost bolts completely. Just these two here on both sides. And then this third one we're just going to remove, halfway. Make sure it's still engaged. You don't need to remove those completely. The front brackets, you take those three 18mm out completely, and this is where your subframe is going to be essentially free. So I've already taken this other bracket as well. It's hung in place by the starter cable, but taking this bracket out will remove that subframe and free up some space. Then we're working on the oil pan, just some 10mm bolts that go all the way around. Just rip these all out, and it's pretty straightforward. The last two are in the bell housing. You can see them tucked up in there. Pretty hard to get at, but you should be able to get some 10mm short sockets on there. These are some bolts that hold the bell housing to the pan. You're going to want to remove these as well. They're all just 16mm, and you got some that are going horizontal and then some going vertical up into the engine block. This one is a little tricky. It's got a combo where it's a 8mm Allen on the back that you have to hold it somehow and then do your 60mm. This is my tool set that I use. And then you can hit it with the rubber mallet and knock it loose, and it should come right out. Removing the front cover is pretty easy. It's just a couple plastic tabs that hold it in place, and it'll reveal everything. To undo your sprockets at the front, you can jam your weights at the back here with a Allen key if you want, or you can put a Allen key at the 12 o'clock position. This is upside down. 12 o'clock position of this sprocket, and that'll lock this sprocket in place and the rest of the gears, so you can undo both of your sprocket bolts. This is a M12 or 10 triple square for your balance shaft, and then I believe this is a T45 for your oil pump bolt. So you can just break these loose and then spin them out by hand usually, and then pop the sprockets off, and you should be ready to work on the rest of the oil pump bolts, which are all just 13 mil. They're just kind of going all the way around. You can see them all. They're all vertical, pretty easy to identify which one's which. That's a triple square for your windage tray, and then just keep working your way around, and this will release the entire oil pump. So I've got it loose. I've got one bolt left in, and I just wanted to make sure that it was all really loose, and now it is. So I'm going to take that last bolt out and get it on.
So we're probably about at the halfway mark in this project. I've got my old oil pump out. I've already gone ahead and cleaned everything, did a tool reset. You want to make sure you clean your oil pan out real good and all your components that go in there. So as for my old oil pump, I went through in a detailed episode that you can find on our channel on how this failed and what options you have in terms of replacement. From what I've done is just a $15 pump, obviously a new tensioner, so that's I think about 80 bucks, but then everything else is kind of reused. So a lot of guys like to reuse or buy new bolts. I'm reusing mine. I've got them all laid out here so you can kind of see all the ones that are horizontal are torque to yield bolts. They should be replaced. This guy here has a little washer on it that helps seal the oil pump pressure. And then these three at the top are for your windage tray at the back here. They're not torque to yield, so you could reuse those. And then something to note is that you have two little dowel locating pins that come from when you remove this, and they seat in these two locations. You're gonna definitely want to make sure you hunt those down and find them because it helps you locate this plate when you're going to reinstall it. So you put your dowel pins in, put this plate on, it locates it all and kind of holds it all in place for you as you're mounting it up. So you can go ahead if you want to, you can inspect your oil pump as well. You can take that out, it's pretty easy to come out. These things rarely ever fail, but something you might want to check on your used one if you are doing that. Otherwise, yeah, clean all your parts, make sure you have all your bolts and they didn't run away from you under your car. So what you want to do to prep is you're going to want to put in your balance shaft sprocket here, and then you put on your tensioner. These I believe are torqued to 15 Newton meters. This I haven't torqued yet. There is no real torque spec for it. You can't even find this bolt. It's a non-replaceable item apparently, so I'm just going to give it the beans. Because I can't really lock this down, there is a tiny little hole there that you can put a 4 mil Allen socket in there, and that'll allow you to kind of lock this in place as you torque it down. So because I've deleted my balance shafts, I don't need to time this with my engine. If you still have your balance shafts, you're going to want to make sure that there's a tiny little dot here. It's really small on this sprocket, but bigger on my other one. You're going to want to make sure that that's aligned with that hole there, and your crank or your motor is in top dead center. So piston number 1 has got to be at the top, and then this is going to be located here, and that's how you make sure this is balanced accordingly to your engine. So once I torque these down, I'm going to torque that down. I'm going to leave my oil pump sprocket off. I've got a little bit of a pin in here to hold the tensioner. Upon removal, I didn't, and this thing just shot out and the spring got loose. So during removal, you're going to probably want to put a pin in just to hold it if you're reusing your tensioner, but always good to replace these. So now I'm going to get under the car and just pop this in. I do actually have a new suction pickup tube. I'm not going to reuse my old one. The screens, they get a little cruddy around the edges, and for the $60 and peace of mind, I'm going to get a new one to pop in, but it isn't in yet, so I'm going to just load this all in and install my new one afterwards. Yeah, so after a little bit of deliberation, I decided to replace this bolt. This is actually from your engine bracket to engine block bolt. It's a M8 Allen instead of a triple square. The exact same thread pitch and length. I'll put a part number for this guy in the description. You can't buy these from the dealership. There's no part number for them. Anyways, I tried to torque this to 50 foot-pounds, which is what a 10.9 grade bolt is rated for at least, and it started to stretch, as you can see. So using one of these bolts worked perfectly. These are bolted to your engine block at 33 foot-pounds, so that's what I did. I put a lot of red Loctite on it there, so it should be good for the service life of this vehicle, especially since it's freewheeling. There's very little resistance on this unit. So that's what I did here. Torqued it on my bench. It came out perfect, and that's what we're gonna roll with. Here it is. Before I put it back in, I've got the plate and my dowels installed. Just doing one last check. Still have my pin in here, so that's good. These are all torqued. Make sure there's no foreign matter in there, and just load it in. I probably should have mentioned beforehand that before you do your install, prep your oil pan surface all the way around. It's a lot easier to do it without this unit in the way. I did it beforehand, I just didn't document it. The sealant was like a clear sealant. You could rub it off with a paper towel almost, but definitely degrease it as best you can and get all the old sealant off. And before you cinch this thing down, you're gonna wanna make sure that it's tight all around the edges as well. I've obviously got it loose, but I've just been fiddling around, making sure those dowel pins locate before I give her the beans. So that's what you want to see. It's nice and tight to the block. I've only got 2 fasteners in, but I'm going to go ahead and do the rest. So next up, now that it's all torqued down, I'm going to put my oil pump sprocket in. This thing's keyed in a certain direction, so it's going to take 2 hands, a couple tries to stick it in and see where it fits exactly. So now that's installed, there's a little bit of a relief in this casing here for the O-ring to be accepted. I had the O-ring on the tube originally, trying to push it in, and it would kind of just spooge out. Didn't want any of it kind of thing. So what I did is I put the O-ring into the relief and then fed the oil feed tube into the O-ring, and that worked out quite nicely. So now that that's installed, I'm gonna go ahead and, because this has been sitting for a little bit, I'm gonna clean up all that residual around the block that you can see the traces of oil dripping down just from sitting. I'm going to undo my AC compressor. I just had it sitting here temporarily, so I'm gonna drop that right out, and then I've also pulled the dipstick as well to get that out of the way, so that way there's no interferences. Check your clearances, dry fit your oil pan a couple times just to see what you're gonna hit, what you're not gonna hit. Once I drop the AC compressor, this is gonna be out of the way. The subframe is fairly low. What I've done is actually I put a sledgehammer here in between the subframe and the frame rail, so that way it kind of keeps the subframe down. Otherwise the natural position wants to kind of creep up on you, so it ruins your room. And I've also actually jacked the engine up a little bit higher than normal, so that way it helps with this clearance here. Otherwise you kind of have to like wiggle it in. So with this amount of clearance, I'm able to just kind of feed the whole oil pan in. I've done a couple dry runs just to see how it wants to go in before I have to commit with a sealant and put it in one last time. So do a couple dry runs, highly recommended, and then this thing's gonna be ready to be buttoned up. So to seal it up, I've got some Permatex Ultra Gray. What I'm gonna try to do is keep this centered where I can, and you don't need a very thick bead, just something that's continuous. You're gonna go around the bolt holes
on both sides, and I'll come around and do the rest of the bolt holes afterwards. Okay, so here it is. It's all done. What I didn't realize to start is that you technically don't need to go past on the outside of the bolt holes. You really just need the inside passes on these bolt holes. That's where your seal is to your engine block. So going around the outside here provides zero benefit. So I'm not going to bother trying to cup these. There's very little bridge area here anyways to put some sealant on. So that is it. You want to make sure all your beads are connected. And this has 0 set time, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop this right in. So just make sure everything looks good. Prep your block surfaces one last time and then throw this in. So once you get it in, it's okay if it slides around just the slightest, but ideally you want to not move or disrupt it as much as possible. But you want to make sure your bolts all go in nice and smooth, so you've got to shift it around a little, then do so. So what Audi recommends, or what the Bentley tells you to do, is that I'm just going to get all these bolts snug. And once those are snug, I'm going to go ahead to my bell housing bolts and I tighten those down so that way it shifts the whole oil pan that way towards the transmission. And then I'm going to tighten this up. And once that's done, you go ahead and just bolt everything else back together like nothing ever happened.
All right, so I'm going to end the video here. I don't want to drag it out with the reinstallation of everything else, but it's been about 9,000 kilometers since I've processed this video, and so far it's been so good. There's been no increased vibrations at all that I've really noticed. The 2 liters of rough motor to begin with. But anyways, if you do have any questions, certainly reach out, leave us a line. We like to respond to every comment that's in there, regardless of question or just comment. And if you like the video, just give it a thumbs up. Otherwise, hopefully this helps some of you guys out there, and enjoy your day.